Hello, clowns.
I'm Ami.
I'm Yu Chen, and we're the hosts of Clown Bites Podcast.
We're two best friends who are chronically online and get together weekly to laugh and discuss all the clown behavior we see on the internet.
And there's so much.
Truly so much.
We're so glad to have you here to clown around with us, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello, clowns, and happy Clown Day. How's it going, Yuch?
I think today is very much a clown day. You're
100%.
on the struggle bus.
I am on the brink of a breakdown. It might happen after this. We'll see.
If the audience is lucky, she'll have one on the episode.
Lucky or unlucky, like we don't know.
I have to expose myself. So we won't expose you, but I can expose myself today.
Okay.
So, you know how when we did our trip to New York the end of last year and I was like trying out new shoes, and you and Harrison basically kind of got me to start thinking that I've been wearing shoes like too small for my feet.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yes, of course. Because I'm like, how are you alive? Like, that's so painful.
Okay. And then when like a bunch of new shoes that I bought post that trip, I kind of like sized up a little bit than what I usually bought. And then today this weekend, I decided to bring out my Reeboks again, you know, the same brand or the same style that we both have.
Yeah.
And it is so tight on my feet that I'm just like,
you can't wear them anymore.
I can't wear them anymore. And
no.
I realized that like, man, I'm really good at just tricking my brain and myself to think that something is fine when actually it's like, what the fuck? Why
Absolutely
did I
not.
subject myself to like so much pain? I think ever since I moved to SF, and there's not a ton of stores that I can go in to like try the shoes. I've just been, buying a ton of shoes online instead. And the issues with these Reeboks is that I did buy a 6.5, which is what I thought my shoe size was, on Amazon, and they were too small. And then I returned them and bought another size 7. And I thought, oh, these fit better. These must be all right. But in reality, if I tried it on in store, I probably would have been like, no, this is actually still too small.
Yeah. I have a 9 or maybe even a 9.5 my Reeboks, which is like much bigger than my normal size.
Yeah. Because usually you wear an 8, right?
An 8.5, yeah.
Yeah. Regardless, I think that I need to stop tricking my brain into thinking things are okay
100%.
when they're not.
You have to do the like pressing on your toe, like between the top and your toe. Like it needs to be the width of your thumb.
I also think, the space between my feet and the like tip of the shoes?
Yeah, not your thumb, but like you need to be able to like press down on there comfortably without like touching your toe.
Whoa. Okay, I think my Hokas are actually a little bit too tight too. My running shoes. So I need to like either have a breakdown with you or switch my shoes.
Let's just switch your shoes. Like, this is not anything to break down over. It's fixable. I have gone down this rabbit hole this week because Nara Smith, who I didn't know, even though you have mentioned her before, but like when you mention someone that like I've never heard their name, it just goes through one ear and out the other because I have no reference of who it is. But she was getting roasted on Twitter this week, and I went down a huge rabbit hole of her perfect life, juxtaposed to mine, where I've been having insane stomach issues. And it's so crazy. Okay, so I know you know about her, but like, I guess how much do you know?
I'm gonna really expose myself, but I've been following Lucky Bluesmith. Actually, I don't know if I follow Lucky Bluesmith, but I knew about him because I follow his ex-girlfriend Stormy Bree. Do you know about that like Stormy Bree, Lucky Bluesmith saga?
I don't know the saga, but I know the highlights from like Googling it.
So I've been following Stormy Bree for a while, and it's because I think she's really fucking cool on Instagram, and her kid with Lucky Bluesmith is just so cute. She used to actually post like facial pictures of her kid, but now she doesn't.
Yeah.
And the kid is like a lot older. But yes, I've been following them for a while. And when Lucky Blue Smith actually got together with Nara, I was like, whoa, because Nara and Stormy have like very different aesthetics. So I was like, this is very different. But Nara and Lucky Blue have been together for quite a bit of time now. So at first I was like shocked, but now I'm like, maybe it works for them. But yes, I recently actually started following Nara on Instagram, and she does have this like very picture perfect life that I'm sure we'll get into. But she didn't actually used to have that kind of aesthetic. When they first started dating, she was a little bit more, I don't know, promiscuous online, like,
and kind of more grungy.
Yeah, she was definitely very grungy, which makes sense because Lucky Blue Smith, I think, also has a very grungy look to him too. But since they've had now about to be 3 kids, their appearance and their brand on social media has definitely shifted, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. Okay, so to give everyone a background, Lucky Blue Smith is a model. Nara Smith is also a model. Her name before was Nara Pelham or something. They got together, and I was having a very hard time figuring out how old she was actually when they got together, because everything says different things. So they got together like probably when she was like 19 or 20. Really? And I think dated only 4 or 5 months before they got married. And Lucky Blue Smith comes from a very Mormon family. So she joined the church because of him. And they had their first child when she was, I guess, 20, like very young. Yeah. They've been having kids pretty much back to back, to where her 3rd child that she's pregnant with right now, she'll have 3 by the time she's like 22, 23.
So they've been in the relationship for basically 3, maybe 4 years at this point, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they've had a child almost every year. And what's like controversial about the 3rd child is apparently she did not want a 3rd child, but then like Lucky really did. And so someone on a Q&A asked, like, I thought you didn't want a 3rd child. What happened? And she was kind of like, oh, our family felt incomplete and like Lucky really wanted one. So then I was like, yeah, I also do. And it just felt a little like brainwashy. I don't know. The discourse on Twitter was basically like she just posted a video of her making fresh cinnamon rolls, like from scratch cinnamon rolls, which most of the videos I watched, she was making crazy ass things from scratch that you don't need to. Like a peanut butter and jelly. She made the bread, she made the jelly, she made the peanut butter. And I was like,
she's
girl,
always baking.
Like, that's fucking wild. But anyway, she's making these cinnamon rolls in a full like gown. Like, this is a very nice dress. She has like so much jewelry on and like almond tips on her nails.
Oh yes.
And anyway, so everyone commented basically lobotomy vibes. This is like, don't worry, darling. Everyone's comment on it was very, this is dystopian and very Stepford Wife-esque. Because it is a very clean video and very, I don't know, put together in a way where it's just like you have 2 kids under 2 or 3 and you make peanut butter and jelly from scratch. Like, what is happening?
It's very homesteading of her.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really make sense because do they still live in LA or do they move back to Utah?
They moved to Texas, apparently.
Oh, more land.
Yeah, I didn't know what city. I assume Dallas, though. They give off Dallas vibes.
That grandma lives in Dallas, so she can say that.
I can say this. They give off Dallas vibes. Anyways, like, she is South African and German. So she did not grow up. Yeah, she's stunning. But I also read that they probably moved to Texas to like make their money go further.
Yeah. With 3 kids, you gotta.
And like, obviously they have a lot of money because they were both models, whatever. But I don't think they're like modeling anymore. No. Or might not be.
I also think she's still doing some brand deals on her Instagram, which is why she's so dressed up. Because I always envisioned her brand as like cooking, family life, but also fashion. Like, she still retains a lot of that fashion element in her social media, which I really enjoyed. She has honestly gotten a lot of shit lately on social media.
She has.
It doesn't surprise me that Twitter is all over this. One of her videos on TikTok kind of popped off because she was like, I woke up at 2 a.m. and thought like, let me dip some peach with like cinnamon. Or she like basically was like, have you ever had this like crazy idea to like sprinkle cinnamon on like peach, and then she started snacking on it at like 2 a.m. and everyone was like, yeah, I don't wake up at 2 a.m. with a full face of makeup and all of that. And so like she is really getting called out for overly portraying that like really put together life. But honestly, I'm curious what your perspective is. Does she really deserve this hate? Because isn't this like exactly what Mormon influencing is, which is our main topic for today?
It is, but I do think it's the style of videos that don't turn people off, but make it a little bit more odd because it is devoid of character.
Yeah.
She
Which is
is
so
like
crazy.
very robotically making these things. And then she does a voiceover, right? So like her voiceover is very put together. Her clips are very succinct. It feels inauthentic, right? And we're reaching an area of time where everyone is looking for authenticity, which is no longer what Nara is doing.
You know what? I think she's just trying to bring back aesthetic Instagram, and like everyone else just needs to jump on the bandwagon. Because did you hear that TikTok is dead and Insta Reels is back?
Ew! No, I refuse. And I think that's probably because of TikTok Shop. Is that why?
100% because of TikTok Shop. Which is funny because as I was seeing all this discourse about blocking the TikTok Shop hashtag, have you seen those videos? I was like,
no.
Is it time for us to release our only unreleased episode on TikTok Shop?
We would need to add a little bit more to it of like the update. That is so interesting because I actually saw Alex Cooper also create a video about how she hates TikTok Shop. Yeah. And I'm like,
we were ahead of the times. Background for the audience. Ami and I actually had an episode ready on how TikTok sponsorship and like sponsored videos have just gotten crazy and over the top. But we listened to it. We were like, what the fuck did we just record? This doesn't really make any sense. And we don't think people will actually want to listen to this. But literally, it's what people are talking about right now.
It was very authentic to like how annoyed we were, but it was a little bit repetitive in us just bitching. So we were like, let's not subject everyone to this. Now's the time, though. If Alex Cooper is complaining about TikTok Shop, we gotta release it.
Yeah.
It could be a bonus episode.
From the archives. Before we move on from Nara Smith and Lucky Blue Smith, I just need to talk about this because I've been trying to bring this up, but no one seems to understand it. So maybe it's a little bit too niche. But when Lucky Blue Smith and Stormy Bree got together, she was 27 or something, and he was 17. Like the age gap was crazy. What's really interesting is now she's rumored to be with Joe Jonas, who, as everyone
did that
knows,
same thing.
Was married to Sophie Turner. They started dating when she was like 17 and he was like 26 or something.
Yeah.
And now Joe Jonas and Stormy Bree are together. So I guess they like fall from the same tree, like the apple fell from the same tree, and now they're together. I hope they're well.
I hope they're well. I actually saw this like tweet basically saying the same thing you just said.
Yeah.
When they got together, but I did not really know who Stormy Bree was or Lucky Blue Smith. So I did not care besides the fact that it's like, ew, for both of these people to have done this. And, you know, like because of the Stormy Bree situation, that's why a lot of people think that Nara's age is so ambiguous because he's trying to basically be like, no, I don't only like older people or whatever, like big age gaps. And some people actually said that it was like religious grooming for them to have gotten together, but I don't think their age gap is like equals grooming. I know we're going to do a grooming episode, so we'll talk about like what it actually means, but it was an interesting Reddit post to say the least.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Would you ever convert to another religion for your future husband?
Probably not. Like I'm barely religious right now. So it's just like, I'm not going to adopt another religion. I'll be spiritual, sure, for like someone. Or if they were like, well, we need to go to church at Christmas. Sure, I can sit through church at Christmas. But like,
only if it's a mega church.
Yeah, only if they're like vibing. Am I going to go to church every Sunday or like some other temple or whatever every Sunday? Hell no. I don't go to mine. Why would I go to someone else's? would you?
You know, so I didn't really grow up in a religious household. Like, I went to church and whatnot, but it was more for funsies. I think my parents like brought me there to like socialize a little bit more in Texas. But sometimes I wonder, because I don't really have my own religion to like hold on to, I could maybe convert, but I wouldn't be like super religious. I think I would adopt it more as like practice. Like you said, like, yeah, I'll go to church ever so often, but I don't think it's like I'm gonna fully embrace it full-heartedly.
Yeah.
And you know how Asians and like Jews always somehow seem to date together?
Yeah.
I have considered like, because I think a lot of Jewish families really like that their entire family remains Jewish. And so if that was the case, then like the Asian person joining the family probably would need to convert in a way.
Yeah.
I've asked myself this, like, would I convert to Judaism? And I was like, maybe I could, but only culturally.
Yeah, the religion honestly seems more open.
Yeah.
Also, which I do like,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know that I could really be a believer of anything. So it would be more superficial. And
it's definitely not within you and I's personality to fully believe in anything. I'm watching Singles Inferno, and one of the questions that they asked is like, do you have a religion? And both of them were like, I believe in myself. And I was like, that's such a good answer, but I don't even believe in myself.
Like, I will grasp on to Hinduism when I'm like in the pits of the pits, but it's not even like, oh, I'm gonna go to the mandir or anything. It's just, oh, please God, can you help me like not have this horrible life? And then as soon as things are like barely okay, like as soon as I'm not just in bed for 10 days in a row, I'll be like, okay, whatever, I don't care anymore.
I am really like, please God, like, please let me get this job, or like, please let me not be sick anymore, whichever God you are. And it usually works out.
No, totally.
For me.
I believe more in my 11/11 wish than I do anything else.
Yeah, you are a firm believer of 11/11, and it worked really well last year, I think, right?
It works when I wish for other people, but it never works for myself. I need someone else to wish.
Okay, let's do a flip-flop after this episode.
Okay, good.
All right. Well, you've probably guessed it. Our episode for today is all about Mormon influencing, and we've wanted to talk about this for a while. I don't know if the audience has realized this, but why are so many influencers Mormon? Honestly, I don't even think Nara talks about being Mormon, or Lucky Blue Swift really talks about being Mormon, but it's like, look up 5 or 6 of your favorite influencers. I guarantee you at least one of them is Mormon. Or grew up Mormon, or there's like somehow tied to the religion, which is really interesting because I don't think like Mormonism, what is the religion called?
Mormon, LDN. It is Mormonism.
Okay, good that we don't have to cut this out.
The Church of the Latter-day Saints, but even Wiki says Mormonism, so let's just go with that.
Okay. But basically, Mormonism isn't like a major religion in the United States or really any region of the world. It's very concentrated in Utah. And it's like spread out across the world, but obviously it's not like one of the major religions. But yet it does seem like it on the interwebs these days because everyone seems to be Mormon.
It's because I think it's so fascinating. And then also, even though your favorite influencers don't say they're Mormon, I guess they're not like hiding that. So it's just prevalent.
Yeah. Okay. But I've been kind of doing a lot of research on Mormon influencing. And I think the reason why Mormons are so good at influencing, and also there's just so many of them, is because their culture and the rise of influencing was literally the perfect storm. Everything was in sync in order for them to be successful. And if you're interested in like the cyclical nature of social media, go listen to one of our episodes on basically social media cycles. And we talk about some of the different origins of social media. And one of them is the blogging era. And this is really when Mormon mommy bloggers took off. And this was in the early 2000s, the 2010s. Do you remember following Mormon mommy bloggers? I guess not, because it didn't really make sense for us. I think we were like,
what, 14?
Yeah, it didn't really make sense for us, but for millennial women, they were like all the rage back then. Do you remember some of the style choices that we made in middle school or high school? Like, do you remember the super loud statement necklaces?
Yes,
the chambray
the
shirts?
layering.
Yeah, the layering, the pencil skirts. We have Mormon mommy bloggers to thank for that, because they were the pioneer of the millennial look. That served us like nothing.
And it's like kind of coming back, and I'm just like, no.
It is.
Please don't.
Also, like at that time, blogging was just taking off. And so many of these women perfectly transition into being able to monetize and become like very early content creators and influencers, because journaling and like writing about your life was a celebrated activity in the Mormon culture.
Yeah.
And honestly, it seems so silly to say like journaling was a thing that was encouraged, but like, were you encouraged to journal when you were young? No. Journaling just became a trendy thing, I think, within the past 15 years or so.
No, for sure. And like they value looking good.
Yeah, the way that the nuclear family is portrayed in their culture is like they really do value the man in the family being the breadwinner. The woman usually is a stay-at-home mom, and having a lot of kids, like we described in the situation with Lucky Blue Smith, is pretty common in Mormon culture. I don't think we'll get into like their views on like sex and premarital sex, but in itself, I think it's encouraged for you to have multiple kids in your family.
Yeah.
And just like having family time together to like celebrate your faith is also really highly encouraged. And the idea of the nuclear family is also something that was like super fascinating during like the early 2000s and early 2010s. Like, remember watching Full House and all those like family oriented sitcoms, which is what Americans gravitated towards, because it's like something that the entire family can watch. And I think people started realizing that they can read about these things that they're interested in online from these Mormon mommy bloggers.
Yeah. How wild. And because like in their nuclear family, like mom is supposed to be just caregiving and like a homestead vibe, they were so easily able to just like add this to the side, versus in other cultures that's not as much the norm or expectation, so they weren't just not set up the same way that it was for Mormons to be able to really take off in the space.
I think a lot of people find like the Mormon lifestyle so aesthetically pleasing and aspiring and interesting. I know I did. I don't know if you like sometimes compare Indian culture households to white culture households, but like for me, a lot of us Asian immigrant households, like the aesthetically pleasing house interior design is not always there. Like I see a lot of people posting about like what their Asian immigrant household looks like, and it's a lot of like knickknacks from over the years, like clutter, which is completely different from the aesthetic that like Mormon families portray online and that they value.
Yeah, even though our houses are more cluttered, everyone wants it to be less cluttered, and like seeing that is nice, right? Like you always want to see things that you would like versus like what you're doing. So it's fun to watch. Like I watch cleaning videos. Do I clean? No.
Okay, the next era of influencing that I want to talk about is like aesthetic influencer era with Instagram and photography era. And Mormons were also very suited to like kind of transition into this new era, because photography and creativity and like the arts was heavily celebrated, I think, in Utah, where it's super beautiful in Utah.
Stunning.
And B, I think the hobby of photography and like taking pictures was also just very, very common in those communities. And they all like rallied around each other to share activities or like share tips and tricks. And I mean, it helps that everyone is very genetically beautiful. The very common long blonde hair, blue eyes, like aesthetically pleasing family is really great to like start getting sponsorships from major home brands that like your wholesome events, and like just started kind of betting on influencers helping to gain traction and spread awareness of their brand. So it's like the fact that these very beautiful people are really good with a camera is basically the perfect store for them to be the first influencers on Instagram.
Man, Who was like the first big Mormon influencer? Do we know?
I feel like it was Indie Blue, or like within our generation, but
yeah.
she wasn't a mommy blogger. So there might be like more mommy bloggers that kind of like started it. But I don't know. Like I can bet money that it was mommy bloggers who kind of transitioned onto Instagram and became kind of like the first paid social media influencers at the time. It was very, very interesting. And then kind of, I think at the same time that like aesthetic Instagram was like kind of popping off, or maybe just a few years later, YouTube and like family vlogging was also starting to take off.
Yeah.
And a lot of these like early influencers, I think, were also reality TV stars, or some of them were like a TLC or maybe a smaller network originally had them as like, you know, because you know how reality TV was also just starting to pop off as well.
Yes.
And so
there was
networks
reality left and right.
were grasping for different concepts, and like following a big family is very interesting to the American viewer.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
As these influencers realize, they don't actually need a network to like reach out to them and like document their own lives. They could just do it with the camera that they had to take pictures of their family. And so there comes a lot of family vlogging, which is just the woman or the men vlogging their day-to-day lives that already exist. So they don't actually need to do anything else than what they've already done, except for set a camera up. Have you ever watched family vlogs? Do they appeal to you at all?
I do not watch family vlogs. Like, I'm not really that interested in it for whatever reason.
Me neither. But I know a lot of people are. So I'm just like, what is that target demographic that likes to watch family vlogs?
I don't know. It's maybe people who like have always wanted a family.
Yeah.
Or like young. I actually don't know. That's a really good question. Sometimes it just happens. You're following someone, you like them, and they like kind of veer into family blogging. So that's maybe how you get into it. But I don't know that I would like just randomly start following a family on YouTube.
I think you're 100% right that a lot of these family vloggers may not have started out as family vloggers. I was reading this article about this guy who was an influencer, was traveling the world, but eventually he, you know, found a wife and got married and had kids, and his content just naturally transitioned to family vlogging. And I think that kind of speaks to Mormon culture as well. Is I hear a lot about how Mormons are very scrappy, but they're very like entrepreneurial. The original mommy bloggers who transition from just blogging to like getting paid sponsorships, those are actually very, very smart, intellectually driven women who were able to create a business out of what they were already doing. And that's fucking amazing. And I think that speaks to a lot of the Mormon culture, is like they're able to monetize the shit out of everything that they do.
Okay, you know what I'm thinking of? Like, do you think that their husband gets like threatened by the fact that they're doing what they're supposed to do for their family, but then also being the breadwinner? Because you can make so much money off of influencing. Like, I don't think that every husband is beating that.
Cut out for it, yeah. I would say, like, I think there is some issues with that because it directly conflicts with the very general idea that the man is supposed to be the breadwinner of the family, right? And I think this perfectly transitions to kind of what I want to talk about, is like how the view of like Mormon influencers have really transitioned from like the beginning to where it is now. Whereas like before, it was very aesthetically pleasing, like perfect family, very much like what Nara Smith is trying to portray now. Like that was very beginning Mormon influencing. But since like social media has evolved lately and we've been demanding more authenticity from all of our influencers, I've honestly seen a lot more people come forth about like divorces or like struggles within their relationships, within their families. I feel like those topics have become more prevalent in Mormon influencing. And I actually read this article of this, I think this woman interviewed this ex-Mormon influencer about like, where are you now that you are divorced from your husband?
Yeah.
And she basically said that she was struggling with her identity because who was she after being a stay-at-home mom, living with her husband, and now she's having to like pick herself back up. But also all of her monetization was from that picture perfect life, which is no more. And there are so many stories of that where like a bunch of the original Mormon mommy bloggers who are no longer together with their family and how their brands have really changed. Some of them are still trying to figure out where their brand sit now in the entire social media sphere. But definitely I think Mormon influencing started out being this one kind of flavor flavor of influencing, and now there's definitely a whole bunch of different flavors of Mormon influencing.
Yeah. Like, why do you even need the guy if you're doing everything for the house and then also bringing in the money? But I mean, your husband should just be happy for you and glad that you're also able to bring in money for the family and be thankful. So it's for the best for those that were not able.
But definitely like your point about how sometimes these women seem to be the breadwinner of the family, and it like contradicts kind of what the Mormon faith wants it to portray. I think Mormon influencing also opens up to a lot of criticism to the outside world, and family vlogging has definitely caused a lot of discourse online and is kind of like the main catalyst for a lot of discussion on like, should your child be portrayed online to help you earn money for your household? And there's definitely like an ethics discussion about this, which I kind of want to touch upon, because a lot of these Mormon family vloggers start out, they're vlogging their kids at a very, very early age. And it's all about the views. It's all about the views and the sponsorship. And they definitely are a little bit clickbaity on YouTube as well, which a picture perfect life doesn't really create a lot of clickbait content, so there's definitely like some controversy there. And then also just the fact that like kids can't give consent to being online. I think very similar to our last episode about like the kids of all these guys who have multiple like girlfriends or wives at the same time. I think like we don't truly know what the kids actually think about the situation until they're significantly older.
And by then, like, you don't know what kind of trauma you've given them. Like, they're having to uncover it as adults, which is very tough to do to your children. I think the kids situation is interesting because now a lot of people have started to hide their kids. But there was a good, like, 20 years where people weren't doing that. Like, their kids are everywhere. And I understand, like, the content is cute, but imagine, like, our whole life was on the internet for anyone to see, and, like, anyone we meet now in our adult life to be able to, like, go and watch without us knowing. Like, we didn't sign up for a reality show.
It literally, like, I get goosebumps just thinking about if my family vlogged my life and childhood growing up. Honestly, I'd be so embarrassed.
It's like you're a child, you're like growing, you're making mistakes, you're doing silly things, like because you're a baby, and no one needs to know that besides your family and like whenever you guys watch home videos. It doesn't need to be on YouTube for anyone to watch. It's also an interesting discussion like with Kendall and Kylie, who don't really like being on TV, but they were basically forced. And while they were like 12 and 14, I guess, when they started, like that's still not old enough to give consent really about being on TV.
Within the next couple of years, I think there's going to be a lot more regulation when it comes to family vlogging and just like using your child for social media. And I'm interested to see how that's going to shape out, because sometimes on my Instagram, I'll see people that I follow, just normal people, even like not post their kids' faces. And I'm just like, interesting that regular Joes who are like not famous are also choosing to do that as well. It's definitely an interesting transition to like what we were used to, where like at the beginning of Instagram, everyone was literally sharing everything about their lives.
I think what's like not weird about just normal people not sharing is kind of like, isn't the point of social media to share your life with your friends? You can have a private Instagram and it's like not going to go anywhere. I guess you would hope that people are not screenshotting it and like sending it around, but the fact that internet security in general has become such an issue is scary.
We all know your struggles with internet security. If you don't, listen to our 20s clowns episode.
But like the safe space of like Facebook just dumping all of your photos so that your family and friends can see is just not the case at all anymore, which is sad and like was the original intent of social media.
I love a good Facebook album.
Love a good Facebook album. And it sucks. Like, I want to see my little cousins or anyone's kids. Like, I think it's fun and cute, but it is always interesting to see what decisions people are making. And I wonder, like, whenever you have a child, like, what you'll do.
Oh my gosh. Will I have a child? Tough question.
If you do have a child, my chances are even less, which is why I didn't say when I have a child.
Fair enough. Okay. Remember when we did our episode on MLMs?
Of course.
Whenever I was researching about Mormon influencing, I just got the eerily like tingly sensation that like it's so similar to MLMs. And the reason why I say this is in our MLM episode, we talk about how women are more prone, or stay-at-home moms, or like people who don't have very traditional jobs, to be susceptible to MLMs. And it's just because it's the allure of like being able to do something at home and like empower yourself to like have your own career. And I think that is just one of the main reasons why a lot of Mormon women get into influencing, because you also bond over the fact that you're Mormon, and it's a very community driven activity. And I think Utah, it's probably like super competitive in New York, but I think in Utah it's actually very community driven, which is really cool and interesting.
Yeah.
Which is exactly how MLMs flourish. So I think Mormon influencing is like a MLM in itself.
Yeah, it must be. Like, I mean, you have all of the elements, right? You have people who like want to do something, who have such tight communities, and who love beauty stuff, and there's just so many beauty MLMs. Like, it's the perfect storm. I wonder if people created MLMs like thinking of Mormons.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I want to bring us to Mormon TikTok, which has been so prevalent, I feel like, in the last couple of years, especially BYU TikTok, which I know is not necessarily Mormon influencing traditionally, but like in essence has become somewhat of a Mormon cultural thing.
I've been very interested in seeing how Mormon TikTok has really taken off, because when I discussed the beginnings of Mormon influencing the millennials, right? Yeah. Mormon took off truly with the Gen Z, and that is just like they're way more open about sharing. They may have like different perspectives of like the Mormon culture, but in a way it's been really interesting to see like what they hold on to from their culture. And BYU TikTok is just wild. It's, I think, almost as interesting as Bama Rush TikTok. Like, just two very different experiences.
No, totally. And like, it's so funny because the comments on all of these videos that really take off, the top couple of comments are always something like, I learn everything about Mormonism against my will. But it is like such a good representation of how interesting their views are, and like how interesting some of the norms that they have are portrayed, I guess.
And that's exactly why Mormon influencing historically also took off, is people just thought their lives were super fucking interesting. Yeah. In a way that they're like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is super aesthetic. But now it's like, this is fucking weird. But I'm like weirdly interested as well.
Yeah. So like, okay, there is this one TikTok I cannot get out of my mind ever. But it's one of those ones where someone is interviewing people on BYU's campus, asking them the most insane questions. And when I texted my friends to ask them to help me find it, I was like, hey, remember that video that was like, would you watch your grandma die or hit a vape? And everyone chose vape. Like, where's that video?
Wait, I saw that video. Didn't you link this video to me?
I linked it because I finally found it. It was a crowdsource effort to find this video. But the questions that they asked, I will go through each of them because they're all so batshit. The first one is, would you rather take a sip of alcohol or kill a puppy? Obviously, most people picked kill a puppy. Then,
for context for our audience, apparently you're not supposed to drink alcohol or hot liquids that are like caffeinated. So like both coffee and tea, you're not allowed to drink. So I'm just like, what are they serving at the BYU campus? Like a bunch of soda?
Soda, yeah. But it's crazy because how is soda better for you than coffee or tea? Like, I just don't understand that. That was like a loophole. Like, they created soda for this loophole. But okay, second question. Would you rather hit a vape or watch your grandma die? And people were like, well, would she die of natural causes?
I know. They were really trying to work around that question.
And like, oh my God, I would rather hit a vape than watch anyone die. And that's so fucking traumatizing.
I would just hit a vape just to hit a vape, I guess.
Yeah, literally. I guess, I don't know. We're just not the audience for that question. But to hear people say that they would watch their grandma die was like so just out of body to even watch.
Yeah.
The last one was, would you rather end premarital sex or end racism? Of course they picked sex. And they have no, like, perception of the world at this point, because there are a bunch of other videos that are like, hey, do you know who this person is? And it's Beyonce.
Oh my
They're
gosh.
just in such a bubble.
Yeah, they definitely are. And the last question in premarital sex or in racism was the one that like stood out to me the most, because one, did you know that in Mormon culture, they don't really encourage interracial breeding or like marriages? I feel like
I would have assumed.
Yeah. Well, no wonder everyone's just so genetically beautiful in their cultures.
Yeah.
Like, I guess there's no intermixing in a way, which is really interesting that, Lucky Blue Smith and Nara are together.
That's so true.
They've deviated from their Mormon culture in that way. And then ending premarital sex, according to Mormon culture, you're not supposed to have premarital sex. It doesn't always go that way. But I remember that episode that I sent you about these two girls reflecting on Mormon culture. And one of them, I don't know if you remember this one part, but she was like making out with a guy in a hot tub. And she was like, am I having sex? Am I getting pregnant? Like, these girls
just have
no education about the woman body or things that I think we actually should be educated about. Like, you can be educated about it and also not have premarital sex. Like, it's not one or the other. And the fact that they are so uneducated in this sense is really scary to me.
Yeah, it's like doing their young generation a disservice, because it's, not helping anyone in that situation to not know, right? Like, you're just making out with someone, you're now freaked out about something that's like not even possible.
Exactly.
Did you watch that one episode of Glee where
of course you'd bring up a Glee episode.
Finn thinks he got his girlfriend Quinn pregnant, but really she had sex with someone else. But she was like, no, remember that time we made out in the hot tub? That's what it's from.
I don't know why our culture is so obsessed with like pregnancies out of hot tub makeouts, but I feel like that's like come up across so many shows.
Yeah. But you know what also was interesting is like one of the interview ones was like, would you be okay if the girl had a bunch of NICMOs? And I was like, wait, what's that? And it's like non-committal makeouts. And even that is a thing that like apparently turns guys off there.
That's really sad
all
because
very interesting. Yeah.
I really like a NICMO, like non-committal makeout. It's thrilling.
And it's also like, okay, you don't want them to have sex. You're young, like you have a lot of hormones, and like you're in college just alone for the first time. Like, what do you expect?
I think that's also why we see a lot of very early marriage,
oh, for sure,
very young marriages. It's one, encouraged in your culture to get married, but two,
early.
The time between knowing someone to an engagement to a marriage is fucking wild.
It's so wild. There's another genre of interview TikToks that are basically like, hey, what's the quickest engagement that you've heard of?
I love those videos.
But one was 3 weeks. 3 weeks to engagement. Then they were supposed to get married 3 months later, canceled the marriage and eloped. So they basically got married in 3 or 4 weeks.
But what's the rush? I really
to have
get sex.
Yeah, I feel like it's for sure to have sex, and then also just the fact that having a lot of kids is encouraged, so people want to start early and have this like very traditional family. I'm sure most people's goal in college is to just find their spouse.
Yeah, the ring by spring is very, very common, I think, at BYU. I mean, it's common at UT, A&M. Like A&M, like the Texas schools as well, but definitely very common at BYU. And I also think there's a lot of peer pressure to find someone too. Like when you see everyone doing it, it's way more normalized versus like us when like a bunch of our friends aren't married or engaged yet. It's just like, well, what's the rush?
Exactly. Okay, so I tried to look this up, and some places do say this and some don't, but I have this like very distinct memory from high school that like the few Mormon people who went there got married very quickly so that they didn't have to go on the mission.
Interesting. I thought the mission was voluntary.
It is voluntary, but it's very like encouraged, basically. Like, especially for men, it's pretty much like you're supposed to go, but if you're married, you don't have to. It doesn't say that specifically anywhere except for Wikipedia, but I really remember hearing about it. So I don't think it's like written in the Book of Mormon, but it is like heavily implied that if you're not married, you should be going to a mission. And people like don't really want to go to missions, right? Like, especially when you can get sent anywhere. So that's also a reason that I've heard, do not cancel me for this, that people get married so early as to basically like not have to go on their mission.
Man, that just seems so difficult to, I don't know, subject someone so young, because if I think back to like how I view life, relationship, and like marriage when I was 17, 18, even 22, it's not the same as now. And
exactly,
I feel like I still have so much to learn about myself and to grow in like my own relationships, that it's crazy that there are people who think that they're able to achieve that level of trust and understanding in a relationship within just 3 weeks of getting to know each other. It really makes me wonder like what the divorce rate and what the like unhappy marriage rate is. Like, I bet the divorce rate is actually very low in this culture because divorce is really frowned upon, but how many of these couples are kind of stuck in a unfulfilled relationship, which is just very sad to me.
Yeah, and like you can't know someone in 3 weeks. Like the reasoning for getting married, if it's these things, like are just not worth it. Like, it's also the same like when I think about people who are like, oh, we want to live together, so we have to get engaged or get married for our parents. That's kind of a common thing in Indian culture. And it's just like, no, that's crazy. You should not just get engaged or married because you want to live together. Like, you should be able to live together and then do that on your own time.
Speaking of Indian culture, so I know we talked about how, you know, arranged marriages has been a very common thing in your culture. I think the speed to engagement and marriage is also very fast in comparison to American culture. How do you think that compares to like the motivation of Mormons getting engaged super early to like arranged marriages happening in your culture super early? And how does like the longevity of those relationships differ in your opinion?
You know, I think like at least in the modern day, you don't get married early, like so early. They're not arranging you in your early 20s. The motivation, I think, is a little bit different. Like, it is to have a partner and be settled. It's like not necessarily because like you want to have sex or like create a lot of kids or live up to this idea of what your like religion says your life should be like.
But do you actually think a lot of these kids are getting married? I think it's more out of not the sex part, but more out of like they want to start their family now. Like in their mind, it's like
the norm to do that.
What is left after college? Like that's their normal, like,
okay,
get
that's
married,
true. I think my perception is so skewed because of the soaking videos versus like the marriage videos, and then it's kind of like, okay, putting two and two together. Okay, fair. I think it is very similar, like the arranged marriage situation, but it's when you're older, so I think you just have a better idea of like who you are and like what you want. And I don't know, your families have vetted each other. It's like same font, different colors type of situation.
Kind of, yeah. Like, it'd be interesting to see if we can maybe ask someone that we know who's Mormon about like how early marriages happen, because to me as an outsider for both cultures, it seems somewhat similar. I would imagine they are also vetting the other person as well. I don't think it's as much of a union between two families in Mormon culture as it is in like Indian culture, but there's definitely a form of like vetting and like a form of like wanting to have a family and like starting that union very early. And in a way, I remember you explaining to me how when marriages get together, they're not always a love marriage. It's all about, you know, staying together and being able to support each other in a way. I think the difference for Mormon culture is like it does start off as a love marriage, but what like keeps them going is that same value, in my opinion, but like very much backed by their religious beliefs, which I think in Indian culture, it also, I think, is very much backed in religious belief too.
Yeah, religious belief is essentially cultural belief too.
Exactly.
For the most part. Yeah, that's fair. I think that is true.
In order to end this episode, I actually want to ask you, would you rather...
Oh, God.
Would you rather be a Mormon influencer, which means you do have to convert to Mormonism, or not wash your legs for an entire year?
Not wash my legs for an entire year. People have been doing it their whole lives, so I cannot do it for a year. That's fine. The thing is, I mean, going back to the beginning of this episode, like I could not convert to a religion with like true intentions. Like it would not be genuine, and that would come out in my Mormon content. So I couldn't do it. I would fail as a Mormon influencer. So I would rather just not wash my legs and not have to go through that journey.
If you were a Mormon influencer, what flavor of influencing would you be? Like, would you be a family vlogger? Would you be like a blogger online or an Insta girl?
I could be none of those things. Like I would be failed at everything. I could never be like a homestead influencer. I don't cook and I don't clean. Like in that sense, and my apartment doesn't look like picture perfect. And then I don't like taking pictures. Like I could be none of them. I would have to be like a crafting Mormon influencer. I don't even know if those
you
are
could.
there. Yeah,
you could be a Pinterest one for sure.
Okay,
like
then
an
I'll do
Etsy
that.
girl. Yeah.
Yes. It'll be like I'm learning how to crochet. I actually started my wobble yesterday. So I could be a crocheting Mormon influencer, minus the Mormon part. What flavor of Mormon influencer could you be? I feel like you could do the homesteading easily.
I could easily be homesteading. I think about homesteading all the time. Get me out of SF. Put me in, I don't know, Idaho. Make me work the farm. I'll do it. But I too, like, I don't think I could ever be like a full-time vlogger. I think I would struggle being a full-time influencer because I was never trained to like upkeep my appearance or like create this like picture perfect point of view in life. But maybe if Mormon influencing is evolving into that, maybe I could, but minus the Mormon part.
Like, are you gonna put on a full face of makeup to work on the farm? It's just not possible. Like, we're just not those people.
No.
We barely put on a full face to go somewhere like fancy. Thanks so much for listening. You can follow us on all social media at Clown Vibes Podcast or email us at clownvibespodcast@gmail.com.
And if you like our show and want to support us, please like, subscribe, and give us a rating and review. That's it for today. Bye, clowns.
Bye, clowns.